Why the apex predator moves in silence, the psychology of quiet power. Part 1. Look around a room full of people. Who is the absolute weakest person there? It is not the one who is physically the smallest or the poorest. It is the one who cannot stop talking. The one constantly filling the silence with jokes, over-explanations, and nervous energy. In the wild, making noise attracts predators. In the human hierarchy, making noise turns you into the prey. Today, we decode exactly why the apex predator moves in silence, and how your own words are constantly being used against you. Let us examine a real-world dynamic. The setting is a high-stakes corporate boardroom in Mumbai. A brilliant but anxious young entrepreneur named Rohan was pitching his revolutionary tech startup to a group of elite billionaire investors. Rohan had practiced his pitch for months. He knew every metric. When he confidently finished his presentation, he stated his final valuation, $10 million. Then, he waited for a response. The lead investor, a ruthless titan of industry known for devouring competitors, did not say a single word. He simply leaned back in his leather chair, steeped his fingers together, and stared dead into Rohan's eyes. 1 second passed, then 5, then 10. The silence in the room became incredibly thick, suffocating, and utterly unbearable. Unable to handle the crushing weight of the dead air, Rohan panicked. His mind raced, convinced that the investor hated the offer and was about to reject him completely. So, without the billionaire uttering a single syllable, Rohan opened his mouth again. "But we are willing to negotiate." Rohan stammered, "We could drop it to $7 million if we close the deal today." The investor's eyes narrowed as he smiled a cold, predatory smile, with absolutely zero effort or argument. His silence had just made him $3 million. Why did this happen? Human beings are psychologically and socially conditioned to abhor silence. It feels like a void, a sign of social rejection, or an impending threat. When you encounter a deliberate pause, your brain's amygdala triggers a mild panic response. The prey instinct kicks in, aggressively urging you to fill the gap, to explain yourself, to seek immediate validation. But the apex predator understands a dark truth. Silence is a psychological mirror. It violently reflects the hidden insecurities of the person sitting across from you. This brings us to the core of Law 4 from the 48 Laws of Power. Always say less than necessary. Every single time you open your mouth, you are handing out free ammunition. You reveal your hidden intentions, your actual boundaries, and your deepest fears. The less you say, the more profound, intimidating, and unpredictable you appear. If you master the pause, you master the opponent. Part 2. Think about the last time someone insulted you, questioned your intelligence, or challenged your authority. Your immediate biological reaction was likely a burning desire to fight back, to explain yourself, and to fiercely defend your ego. But defending yourself verbally is actually a subtle admission of vulnerability. It screams to the room, "This person's words have the power to hurt me." The apex predator never defends, they observe. When you learn to detach your ego from your tongue, you transform from a reactive prey into an untouchable force. Let us observe a social power dynamic at a prestigious networking gala in Dubai. Vikram, a self-made logistics mogul originally from Delhi, was attending. He was a man who embodied Law 4 of the 48 Laws of Power. While quietly sipping his drink, a rival CEO, a man notorious for his loud, aggressive, and arrogant demeanor, approached him. Surrounded by a circle of highly influential investors and onlookers, the rival decided to publicly humiliate Vikram to establish his own dominance in the room. "I heard your latest European supply chain deal is completely collapsing." Vikram, the rival, mocked loudly, a smirk plastered on his face. "Are you finally losing your edge? Or were you just a lucky amateur the first time?" The crowd instantly fell dead silent, holding their breath, waiting for the explosive argument. A lesser man, driven by the prey instinct, would have immediately listed facts, raised his voice to justify his business, or insulted the rival back. Instead, Vikram did absolutely nothing. He didn't blink, he didn't frown, he simply looked at the rival with a completely blank, unreadable expression, like a scientist studying a noisy, insignificant insect under a microscope. The silence stretched for an excruciating 10 seconds. The rival's smug smile began to tremble and crack. Feeling the crushing weight of Vikram's emotionless gaze and the suffocating awkwardness of the staring crowd, the rival panicked. He nervously chuckled and started backpedaling to save face. I mean, obviously the global market is tough for everyone right now. We've had some minor issues too. I was just joking, mate. Vikram had completely destroyed the man's authority and dignity without uttering a single syllable. This is the devastating psychological mechanism of the silent stare. When you react emotionally to an attack, you feed your opponent energy. You validate their attempt to bring you down. By offering absolute silence, you create a psychological vacuum. The aggressor suddenly feels exposed, standing alone on a stage of their own making. Their brain registers your lack of emotional response as severe social danger. The anxiety of the void forces them to keep talking, to dilute their own attack, and ultimately, to embarrass themselves in front of the pack. The prey always reacts, the predator only watches. The next time you are challenged, provoked, or insulted, forcefully suppress the urge to justify yourself. Do not give them the satisfaction of your reaction. Your silence is a weapon of mass psychological destruction. It deflects their negative energy and forces the other person to confront their own hostility, making them question their sanity and their social status. Let them drown in the ocean of their own unnecessary words while you stand safely on the shore. Part 3. Have you ever noticed that the person who talks the most in a negotiation is usually the one who loses? Words are exactly like currency. The more you print, the less valuable they become. When you constantly speak, you are actively depreciating your own worth. The apex predator knows that silence is not just a defensive shield, it is an offensive vacuum that sucks out the deepest secrets of the opposing side. Let us explore how remaining quiet forces your opponent to hand over the keys to their own defeat. Let us move to a high-end real estate negotiation in a luxurious penthouse overlooking the London skyline. Arjun, a formidable software magnate from Bengaluru, was looking to acquire the property. The seller's agent, a slick, fast-talking broker, was desperately trying to close the deal. The agent spent 20 minutes aggressively highlighting the marble floors, the panoramic views, and the exclusivity of the neighborhood. He confidently stated that the absolute final price was £15 million. Strictly non-negotiable. Arjun did not flinch. He simply walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window, looked out at the city, and said absolutely nothing. He didn't nod, he didn't argue the price. He just stood in complete, intimidating stillness. The broker, terrified that the massive deal was slipping away in this heavy, unresponsive silence, could not handle the tension. His prey instinct forced him to keep selling. Of course, if 15 is too high, the broker babbled nervously, walking up behind Arjun. The owner is actually going through a brutal, very public divorce right now and desperately needs liquid cash by Friday. If you can sign the papers today, I can personally guarantee he will accept 12 million. Arjun slowly turned around, without making a single counter offer or uttering a single word. His silence had just saved him £3 million and completely exposed the seller's ultimate vulnerability. Why do people sabotage themselves in the face of silence? In behavioral psychology, this is known as the interrogation pause. When elite detectives question a suspect, they often state a fact and then stay completely quiet. The human brain cannot tolerate unresolved social tension. To relieve this agonizing internal pressure, the person will instinctively keep talking. They will over-explain, rationalize, and inevitably volunteer highly sensitive information they never intended to share. By doing nothing, you force the other person's brain to turn against them. In any high-stakes situation, whether it is a salary negotiation, a business deal, or a tense confrontation, state your premise, make your demand, and then lock your jaw. Let the uncomfortable silence hang heavy in the air. The other party will inevitably rush to fill the void. In their desperate attempt to break the tension, they will negotiate against themselves and hand you the exact leverage you need to dominate the interaction. Part 4. If you can perfectly predict a person's reaction, you hold absolute power over them. The moment someone figures out your patterns, your emotional triggers, and your beliefs, you become nothing more than a puppet on their strings. So, how do you cut those strings? By becoming completely unreadable. The apex predator understands that every word you speak draws a detailed map of your mind for your enemies. Silence, on the other hand, creates an impenetrable fog of war. Let us examine a hostile corporate takeover in the financial district of Singapore. Marcus, the elusive founder of a massive international AI firm, was facing a sudden, coordinated mutiny from his own board of directors. The board members had secretly plotted to vote him out and steal control of the technology. During an emergency meeting, the ringleader aggressively laid out the charges: missed deadlines, erratic leadership, and falling stock prices. The ringleader fully expected Marcus to shout, to beg, or to frantically present a defense strategy. Instead, Marcus sat at the head of the long obsidian table, perfectly calm, his hands folded. He let the ringleader rant and hurl insults for 20 straight minutes without blinking. Assuming Marcus's silence was a sign of shock, surrender, and defeat, the mutineers grew overwhelmingly arrogant. In their overconfidence, they carelessly revealed their entire hidden strategy, openly naming the outside rival investors they were secretly colluding with. Only when they had completely exhausted their arguments and laid all their cards on the table did Marcus finally move. He slid a single, signed document across the table. He hadn't been defending himself because he didn't need to. The paper proved he had quietly bought out the company's largest shadow investor the night before, securing 51% of the voting power. By staying silent, he let them dig their own graves. He fired them all on the spot. Why is the unknown so terrifying to the human mind? In evolutionary psychology, uncertainty equals mortal danger. Our ancestors survived by predicting patterns in nature and in other tribes. When a person remains silent, they offer absolutely no behavioral patterns to analyze. This forces the opponent's brain into overdrive, frantically generating worst-case scenarios. People naturally project their own deepest insecurities onto your silence. They automatically assume you hold a hidden advantage, that you know a secret they don't. You become an enigma, and the human mind is hardwired to fear what it cannot understand. Never let anyone map your mind. If you constantly voice your opinions, your dislikes, and your future plans, you make yourself completely predictable. A predictable target is an easy target. Hide your true intentions behind a wall of calculated silence. When people cannot anticipate your next move, they cannot prepare a defense against it. You remain a mystery, and mystery commands deep, unspoken respect. Part 5. When a hunter wants to trap a wild animal, they do not chase it exhausting themselves through the forest. They lay down a piece of bait, hide, and wait for the animal's natural impulses to make it careless. In human interactions, insults, provocative questions, and false accusations are the exact same thing. They are bait. The moment you open your mouth to angrily defend your pride, the trap snaps shut. The apex predator recognizes the trap and starves the hunter through absolute silence. Consider a high-stakes, live television broadcast in New Delhi. A brilliant, rising political strategist named Dev was invited for an interview with a notoriously aggressive journalist. This host built his entire career on baiting guests into losing their temper and making them look foolish on national TV. Right in the middle of the broadcast, the journalist launched a sudden, completely fabricated, and deeply personal attack on Dev's family integrity. He leaned forward, smirking, waiting for the explosive, shouting denial that would guarantee viral ratings. Dev did not frown. He did not raise his hands defensively. He did not utter a single word of denial. Instead, Dev simply leaned back, took a slow, deliberate sip of water, and stared at the journalist with an expression of profound, chilling pity. He allowed dead silence to broadcast live to millions of viewers for 10 excruciating seconds. In the television industry, dead air is catastrophic. The journalist's smirk vanished, sweating profusely under the studio lights and the crushing silence. The host realized he looked like an unhinged, unprofessional bully, panicking to save his own segment. The journalist stuttered, awkwardly apologized, and quickly changed the subject. Dev won the debate without fighting. Why is ignoring the bait so overwhelmingly powerful? In psychology, highly aggressive or manipulative people rely on a concept called narcissistic supply. They need your emotional reaction, your anger, your fear, or your desperate justification, to feel powerful and relevant. When you react, you are literally handing them the remote control to your nervous system. Complete silence deprives them of this supply. It acts as a psychological mirror, instantly reflecting their toxic behavior back onto them. Without your reaction to fuel the fire, their aggression burns out and turns into deep, public humiliation. Law 4 is not just about keeping secrets, it is the ultimate test of emotional control. Never catch a hot coal thrown at you. Let their toxic words fall to the floor and burn out. By refusing to engage with the bait, you establish yourself as an untouchable force. You do not lower yourself to the level of the prey. You force the attacker to suffocate in the heavy silence of your pure indifference. Part 6. Have you ever noticed that kings rarely shout? The loudest person in the room is usually the one with the least amount of actual power. When you talk constantly, your words become cheap, much like a currency suffering from severe hyperinflation. But when a chronically silent person finally opens their mouth, the entire world stops to listen. Today, we uncover how the apex predator uses the psychological principle of scarcity to artificially inflate the value of their words, making every single sentence strike like a thunderbolt. Let us observe a shift in power at a massive, failing automotive manufacturing plant in Munich, Germany. The facility was bleeding money. The previous director was a notorious screamer. He held 3-hour daily meetings, micromanaged every detail, and yelled at his managers constantly. Because his words were so abundant, the staff became entirely immune to them. They simply tuned him out. When the board fired him, they brought in Elias, a turnaround specialist known for his icy demeanor. On his first day, the department heads gathered in the conference room, fully expecting another loud, aggressive lecture. Elias walked in, looked at the dismal production charts on the wall, looked at the managers, and sat down. He did not say, "Hello." He did not introduce himself. He just sat in absolute, heavy silence. 5 minutes passed. The silence in the room became agonizing. The managers, conditioned to defend themselves against a screaming boss, had no idea how to combat a silent one. The sheer gravity of Elias's quiet presence broke their defenses. Unable to bear the tension, the head of engineering cracked. Without Elias asking a single question, the engineer blurted out a confession about a massive flaw in the assembly line they had been hiding for months. Soon, other managers started confessing their own hidden bottlenecks and frantically proposing solutions. After 20 minutes of the team exposing all their own secrets, Elias stood up. He spoke exactly 4 words: "Fix it by Friday." He then walked out. The impact was earth-shattering. The plant's efficiency skyrocketed within a week. This phenomenon is rooted in the economic and psychological principle of scarcity. The rarer an asset is, the higher its perceived value. This law applies directly to human communication. When you speak incessantly, your words are abundant, common, and therefore, practically worthless. The human brain actively filters out predictable, constant noise. However, when you speak rarely, your words become scarce stimuli. The brain is hardwired to pay extreme attention to rare events. By withholding your speech, you subconsciously train people to deeply crave your input and respect your authority. Stop diluting your own authority with unnecessary chatter, small talk, and constant over-explanation. If you want your words to carry the absolute weight of a king's decree, You must first build a dark fortress of silence around them. Do not speak simply to fill the air. Speak only when your words will definitively change the game. Part 7. How do you catch a master manipulator in a lie without asking a single question? The average person's immediate instinct is to interrogate, to loudly accuse, and to proudly present their evidence. But the apex predator knows a terrifying truth. Maintaining a lie requires an immense amount of mental energy. If you stay completely silent, the liar's brain will panic, forcing them to add unnecessary, frantic details until their entire fabricated reality collapses on itself. Let us examine a brutal betrayal within Bangalore's hyper-competitive tech sector. A brilliant software architect named Kabir discovered that his trusted co-founder, Raj, had been secretly embezzling company funds. Kabir already possessed the undeniable bank records, but he needed a verbal confession to avoid a drawn-out, public lawsuit. He called Raj into a soundproof glass office. Raj walked in with a perfect, practiced smile, armed with a carefully rehearsed speech about unforeseen operational expenses. Kabir did not yell, he simply slid a completely blank folder across the table, crossed his arms, and stared directly into Raj's eyes with a cold, unblinking gaze. Raj looked at the unmarked folder, and his paranoid mind instantly assumed it contained his total destruction. The silence in the room grew heavy and suffocating. Desperate to fill the void and prove his innocence, Raj started talking. First, he confidently blamed a third-party marketing agency. Kabir remained dead silent, not even nodding. Raj's confidence began to crack. He nervously changed his story, now blaming a rogue accountant. As Kabir's emotionless silence stretched into a brutal 5 minutes, Raj's rehearsed lie completely shattered. Sweating, trembling, and unable to endure the psychological torture of the quiet room, Raj finally broke. "Look, I only took a small loan for my personal debts. I was going to put it back," he blurted out. Kabir had not shown a single piece of evidence, yet Raj had just confessed to a felony. Why does silence utterly destroy liars? Behavioral psychologists explain this through cognitive load theory. Formulating and maintaining a lie is incredibly exhausting for the human brain. The liar must construct a fake reality while simultaneously monitoring your reactions to see if you believe them. When you offer absolutely zero verbal or physical feedback, no nods, no frowns, no questions, you deny the liar the social cues they desperately need to adjust their story. Their cognitive load maxes out. The silence induces severe paranoia, forcing them to over-explain until they accidentally contradict their own narrative. When you suspect deceit, do not rush to confront the person or eagerly reveal your cards. Present them instead with the terrifying, empty void of your silence. Let them talk, let them frantically spin their web of lies, and watch with quiet amusement as they inevitably strangle themselves in it. The prey exhausts itself trying to build a perfect illusion. The predator simply waits in silence for the illusion to shatter. Part 8. Have you ever noticed that the moment you start explaining your actions, you immediately feel less powerful? Justification is a subconscious form of begging. When you over-explain your decisions to others, you are implicitly asking for their permission and validation. The apex predator never asks for permission. They act, and they let the results speak. Today, we expose how the desperate need to be understood destroys your authority, and why absolute silence is the ultimate display of untouchable confidence. Let us enter the high-stakes, exclusive underground poker rooms of Macau. An arrogant tech billionaire named Julian was dominating the table. Julian was a textbook prey trying to mimic a predator. With every hand he played, he narrated his thought process, bragged about his massive wealth, and aggressively taunted the other players. He believed his loud, dominating presence was intimidating the room. Sitting across from him was a quiet, unassuming gentleman named Chen. Chen had not spoken a single sentence the entire night. He only used simple hand gestures to check, call, or raise. In the final, multi-million-dollar hand, Julian pushed all his chips into the center. He immediately started his psychological warfare, laughing loudly across the table. "You should fold, old man. I have the winning hand. And I can afford to lose this money anyway. Can you?" Julian kept talking, trying to project absolute power. Chen did not respond to the insults. Instead, he simply observed. Chen had noticed hours ago that Julian's breathing got slightly faster and his voice pitch went a fraction higher whenever he talked during a bluff. The endless talking wasn't intimidation, it was a nervous release valve. Chen silently pushed his entire stack forward to call. Julian's loud laughter died instantly. His face went completely pale. He was bluffing with absolutely nothing. Chen took the massive pot without ever defending his pride or explaining his strategy. Why do we feel the overwhelming urge to over-explain? It stems from a deep-rooted psychological need for social harmony and external validation. When you explain your actions, you are voluntarily placing the other person in the position of the judge. You are literally handing him the power to evaluate you. The constant talker is desperately trying to control how others perceive him. The silent operator, however, possesses extreme internal conviction. They do not require the audience to understand their moves, which makes them psychologically bulletproof. Never explain yourself unless it is strictly necessary for operational logistics. When you make a decision, own it entirely in silence. If people misunderstand you, let them. If they question your methods, let them watch the terrifying results. By refusing to justify your actions, you strip others of their power to judge you, instantly elevating yourself to a position of unquestionable authority. Part 9. What is the ultimate test of true power? It is not how loudly you roar when you are winning. It is how completely silent you remain when everything is burning to the ground. In moments of sudden crisis, the weak reveal themselves by panicking, shouting, and desperately seeking reassurance. The apex predator does the exact opposite. They absorb the chaos. They become a psychological black hole. Today, we reveal how weaponized silence during a crisis establishes absolute, undeniable dominance over the pack. Let us transport ourselves to an elite, billion-dollar hedge fund in Mumbai during a sudden, catastrophic market crash. Red numbers flashed across every screen as a major global tech bubble burst. The trading floor descended into absolute madness. Senior portfolio managers were screaming into their phones. Junior analysts were hyperventilating, and the managing director was frantically pacing the room, yelling conflicting orders to everyone. The air was thick with the stench of pure prey instinct, panic. In the center of this hurricane sat Rishi, the firm's top strategist. Rishi did not make a single frantic phone call. He did not yell at his team. He simply sat with his arms crossed, staring intensely at the collapsing data on his monitors, absolutely motionless. The frantic managing director, losing his mind, ran over to Rishi's desk and screamed, "Do something, Rishi, we are bleeding millions every second. Speak to me, give me a strategy." Rishi slowly turned his head. He looked at the panicking director. Let a heavy, suffocating 5-second silence fill the space between them, and calmly whispered, "Let it bleed." Rishi had silently analyzed that the crash was a temporary algorithmic error, a flash crash. While the entire floor was liquidating assets at a massive loss due to verbal panic and group hysteria, Rishi's silence was a calculated waiting game. 20 minutes later, the market violently corrected itself. The screamers lost half their portfolios. Rishi's quiet, emotionless hold resulted in a record-breaking profit. The entire firm realized instantly who the real leader was. Why is silence so stabilizing during chaos? In evolutionary biology, the herd looks to the alpha when a predator approaches. If the alpha runs, the herd stampedes. If the alpha stands perfectly still, the herd freezes. This is called emotional contagion. When you speak during a crisis, your voice naturally carries the high-pitched frequencies of adrenaline and fear, infecting everyone around you. By refusing to speak, you violently break the chain of panic. You signal to the primal brains of everyone in the room that the threat is under control. Their psychological dependence automatically shifts onto you. When the world around you catches fire, shut your mouth and open your eyes. Do not add your voice to the chaotic noise of the masses. Let the weak exhaust themselves with their panic and emotional outbursts. Your terrifying calmness in the face of destruction will instantly position you as the center of gravity in any room. The apex predator does not scream at the storm. They wait in silence for the storm to pass. And then they quietly feast on what is left behind. Part 10. Have you ever heard someone scream, "Do you know who I am?" or "I will destroy you"? These are not the roars of a predator. They are the desperate cries of prey. Making a threat is a catastrophic strategic mistake. It reveals exactly what you plan to do, giving your enemy the exact blueprint to build their defense. The apex predator never makes threats. They understand a dark psychological truth. The anticipation of an attack is infinitely more terrifying than the attack itself. Let us look at a high-stakes corporate espionage confrontation in New York City. Victor, a cold and calculating investment banker, discovered that his ambitious junior partner, David, was secretly selling proprietary trading algorithms to a rival firm. David, realizing he was caught, decided to play aggressively to save himself. He stormed into Victor's office, slammed his hands on the mahogany desk, and issued a loud, aggressive ultimatum: "If you fire me or report me, I will leak our entire elite client list to the press. I will ruin your reputation overnight. What are you going to do about it?" David waited, his heart pounding, expecting Victor to scream back, to negotiate, or to threaten massive legal action. Victor did not say a single word. He did not threaten to call the authorities. He did not yell. He simply looked at David with dead, expressionless eyes, slowly closed his laptop, stood up, and walked out of his own office, leaving David standing there completely alone. The silence was deafening. Over the next 48 hours, Victor made absolutely no contact. No emails, no lawsuits, no phone calls. David's mind began to spin out of control. The total absence of a stated threat made David's imagination run wild with horrific scenarios. Was Victor hiring private investigators? Was he destroying David's career behind the scenes? Unable to handle the psychological torture of the unknown, David cracked. He walked into the authorities and confessed everything, hoping for leniency, completely destroying himself before Victor even lifted a finger. Why does this happen? The human brain is an anticipation machine. When you explicitly threaten someone, you put a definitive, logical cap on the damage. The brain processes the threat and prepares a defense for it. But when you offer absolute silence, you leave the consequences entirely to the imagination. The human imagination is a master at creating monsters. The unspoken threat expands infinitely in the victim's mind, creating a paralyzing state of chronic anxiety known as impending doom. They torture themselves far worse than you ever could. Law 4 demands that you never warn your enemies of your wrath. Do not bark. Barking is for guard dogs, not wolves. If someone crosses you, absorb the insult in absolute silence. Let the chilling void of your unsaid intentions feed their paranoia, and watch as their own fearful imagination destroys them from the inside out. Part 11. Have you ever noticed how society treats the person who is always available to talk? We treat them like background noise. Familiarity breeds contempt, and constant chatter breeds disrespect. If you are always speaking, your words become cheap commodities. But what happens when you completely withhold your voice? You transform from a common participant into the ultimate judge. The apex predator knows that to command absolute reverence, you must make people mathematically starve for your opinion. Let us travel to an exclusive, invite-only economic roundtable hidden deep in the Swiss Alps. The room was filled with the world's most powerful tech founders, hedge fund managers, and political strategists. For 3 brutal hours, the room was a chaotic battlefield of egos. Billionaires aggressively interrupted each other, loudly pitching complex, panicked models to solve an impending global energy crisis. Among them sat Arav, an elusive industrial titan from Mumbai. For exactly 180 minutes, Arav did not utter a single syllable. He just observed, his face completely unreadable, while the others exhausted themselves in an endless shouting match. Eventually, the room reached a complete, agonizing deadlock. The loud, aggressive billionaires were mentally drained, frustrated, and completely out of ideas. Slowly, the noise died down. The room fell into an eerie silence as they collectively realized Arav hadn't spoken at all. The gravitational pull of his deliberate silence became physically irresistible. The chairman turned to him, the desperation clear in his voice, and practically begged, "Arav, what is your verdict?" Arav slowly closed his notebook. He looked around the exhausted room and delivered a single, unadorned sentence. "We do not fight the shortage, we buy the infrastructure." It was a fundamentally simple strategy, but because it came after 3 hours of absolute, calculated silence, the room treated it like divine revelation. The debate ended instantly. They followed his exact command without a single objection. This is a powerful psychological phenomenon known as the guru effect. The human brain automatically associates silence and scarcity with extreme value. When you talk constantly, you are actively chasing attention, which is a low-status behavior. When you remain perfectly silent, you force the environment to seek you out. By withholding your words, you build immense psychological anticipation. When you finally break that silence, the contrast is so sharp that listeners automatically assign profound brilliance, authority, and weight to whatever you say. Law 4 teaches us that speaking too much reduces you to a commoner. If you want your words to carry the devastating weight of an oracle, you must cultivate the ruthless discipline of silence. Let others squabble, boast, and drain their mental energy trying to impress the room. Wait patiently until they are completely lost in their own noise. Only then, drop the anchor, speak once, speak firmly, and watch the world bow to your quiet power. Part 12, Final. The ultimate power does not lie in what you do, it lies in what you absolutely refuse to do. Society programs you from birth to react, to shout your worth, and to fiercely defend your ego. But true power is a shadow. It is uncatchable, unreadable, and devastatingly silent. The transition from prey to the apex predator is not about getting louder or stronger, it is about going completely dark. Today, we conclude our journey into Law 4 by showing you how becoming a ghost is the ultimate checkmate. Let us examine the final stage of a ruthless corporate war in Mumbai. Siddharth, a notoriously secretive telecommunications billionaire, was facing a massive, highly public smear campaign from a loud, desperate rival CEO. The rival spent tens of millions of dollars on aggressive PR attacks, challenging Siddharth to public debates, leaking false rumors, and trying to force him into a muddy, emotional fight. The media waited hungrily for Siddharth's furious retaliation. Siddharth simply vanished. He issued 0 press releases. He sent no legal threats. He gave no interviews. For 6 entire months, he offered absolute, crushing silence. The rival, fighting a phantom, looked increasingly unhinged, obsessed, and desperate, because Siddharth offered no resistance. The rival's aggressive energy had nowhere to land, so it reflected inward. The rival's shareholders, terrified by his erratic, one-sided obsession, lost all faith and violently pulled their funding. The rival's stock plummeted to 0. Siddharth emerged from the shadows only once, to quietly buy his enemy's bankrupt empire for pennies on the dollar. He won the war without firing a single shot. This is the psychology of the void. In martial arts and military strategy, if you strike at empty air, the momentum of your own attack will throw you off balance and break your own bones. The apex predator understands that an enemy cannot destroy what they cannot locate. By becoming a ghost, you deprive the attacker of a target. You force them to exhaust their financial, emotional, and psychological resources fighting a war against their own shadow. To master the psychology of quiet power, you must kill your ego's desperate need to be seen and heard. Move in silence, let your enemies scream, plot, and exhaust themselves trying to provoke you. Your absolute stillness is not weakness. It is the ultimate, terrifying display of control. The prey makes noise to feel alive. The predator stays perfectly silent to survive, to hunt, and to conquer. You have now unlocked the dark psychology of quiet power. But knowing the rules is only the first step. Applying them takes ruthless discipline. Are you ready to stop acting like the prey and take control of your reality? If this video shifted your perspective, hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications. Do not remain a pawn in someone else's game. Join the archive of the elite. Evolve, or be hunted. I will see you in the next analysis.